This is Ruthie Lieberman from EMPath, part of the EYES coaching team, and again, very sorry for the delays, but we will jump into our presentation today. Today we are really excited to be talking about how to integrate 2Gen strategies into the TANF coaching environment. We have some presenters here today from EMPath, my organization, as well as from the Washington, D.C. TANF office. And they're each going to share a bit about what their 2Gen program looks like and how it's delivered within a coaching context. But the real purpose of today's call is to have a conversation. So this is not supposed to be a traditional webinar. We aren't going to have lots and lots of slides, but we really want to have some comments from all of you who are on the call. Share with us what you're thinking about, what you're doing, what you're planning. Even if you're not already doing 2Gen, we really would love some feedback and give and take. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my two colleagues. Yeah, please back up. I'm going to introduce my two colleagues from EMPath. First, we're going to have Stephanie Brooke, who's the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and one of the creators of our InterGen program here at EMPath. And with her will be Sarah Belmore, who's the Director of our Career Family Opportunity and InterGen program and who has been delivering direct services in a coaching context for quite some time, very seasoned. And so the purpose of today's call is to have a conversation with anyone who's thinking about using a coaching approach in a 2-generation model. So even if your TANF coaching program is not yet up and running, please, we're glad that you're part of this conversation. It's not a linear process. One doesn't need to happen before the other. And this is just an informal exchange of ideas today. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Stephanie. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Stephanie. It's really nice to be on the phone with you today, and hopefully this will provide you some great context to thinking about what 2-generation work can look like within your TANF program. So as Ruthie mentioned, I came to EMPath right when our multi-generational work was getting off the ground, and we were operating in an adult coaching context, and so we thought if our adults are noticing that their kids are doing better because they're working on goals and they're thinking about what the future means for themselves, then what would it mean if we intentionally started including the children in our programming? What kind of results could we be seeing? So that's the context behind why we started doing this effort. So what we commonly refer our 2-generation work to as is the Intergenerational Mobility Project, InterGen for short. Sarah and I are going to try really hard to say 2-generation, but in case InterGen slips out, that's why. So to get us started, to just think about how we define 2-generation work within our service delivery and why we started getting into this work, this image is one that's really grounded our theory to think about the different levels of impact that poverty has on families, individuals and families, and what that means for our service delivery. So what you see at the top is outcomes, which is the most popularly reported impact that poverty can have on children and families. And so if we think about rates of school achievement and levels of income and how much that level of income a parent has, how that affects a child's ability to move forward in life later on, and bidirectionally, right? So if a child has significant mental health or physical needs, how challenging it can then be for the parent to be able to pursue their own education or job-related dreams. And so then when we go down to the next level, we call that the inner self level. And you'll notice that the parent and the child have this inner self brain on the inside of this image. And the idea is that we're talking about sense of self and mindsets that people have when they're in poverty. So what are the messages that they're getting from society, from their community, from their family, from their friends about what is possible for them and how they should be behaving with their children? Am I someone who can break out of this generational poverty that I've been living in and go and become a nurse and provide for my family in that way? Or is that not something that my community thinks I'm capable of doing? Or is this not something that society thinks that I should be doing? And because a child's inner self is really built through that co-regulation, so what are the messages I'm getting from my parents? What am I seeing my mom or my dad doing, and how does that impact what I decide is possible for me as a child? We then start thinking about this family level in the middle, that little heart you see. And that's what we've really been focusing on EMPath. And our theory is just that if we intentionally work towards family alignment, so parents and children communicating and talking about what dreams do they have for themselves, how can they support each other, how can they grow individually without growing apart, then we think that the journey towards moving out of poverty can be more sustainable, because life happens, and if your family is aware of how they can support each other, then they're building those skills over time to continue to do that work without a mentor or a coach present. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah just to give a little bit more intergen at EMPath, or two-generation work at EMPath context.
Yes, so our two-gen program at EMPath has gone through a bit of an evolution. So it originally started, I think, back in 2014 with a small group of CFO families. So the program that I oversee just started with 5 families there, and it has since grown. But it was piloted as a bit of an add-on for families that are participating in existing EMPath programs. So, for example, if a family was in one of our shelter programs and wanted to participate in our two-gen program, they would continue working with their case manager in shelter, working on goals related to securing permanent housing, and then they would additionally work with a family coach as part of the whole family coaching. So they would have 2 coaches that they would work with on different things. And this became pretty cumbersome for families, a little confusing for families, and a little unsustainable. What we learned is that this can really be done by one coach, and that would kind of take the burden off of families, off of having 2 coaches working with one family, and it just seemed more sustainable. So the way our two-gen program works today is that it's an embedded part of programming in 3 of our different EMPath programs. So we have 3 family coaches that work with whole families in existing EMPath programming. So we ask participants who are interested to commit to at least 1 year of whole family coaching. Participants can extend up to 3 years, but the average length of time that families participate has been about 2 years. We use tools for the whole family. So adults, we have tools for each child in the home, and we have whole family tools. And something that's a little bit different is we ask the families to identify for themselves who is part of their family and who they want to participate in the program. So sometimes this includes aunts or grandparents or cousins, but we really allow the families themselves to define who is part of their family that they want to participate. And the main focus remains around self-assessment, and goal setting is a big chunk of the work that we do. And our visits take place sometimes in the office, sometimes in the community, and sometimes in the family's home, which is a little different than we had done before. So because we've gone through a number of changes over the years, we are continually learning lessons about how two-gen works here at EMPath. So one of the biggest changes for the coaches was that each coach went from working primarily with the adult head of household to working with whole families, which is a bit of a change. And so many of the families who are participating in two-gen were originally just working just as the adult working with the coach. And so the participants also had to get used to this kind of change in structure. So what some staff have done have tried splitting up the meetings so that half the time is spent on family-focused work and the other half is spent on just the head of household and his or her goals. You have to account for the visits and meetings taking longer. So we have to incorporate new tools So there are more tools than were previously used, more voices that are expressing their thoughts and opinions in each meeting. So meetings take more time, especially with bigger families. So we went with working sometimes with one individual to 7, and so that's a big shift. We want to make sure that we meet families where they're most comfortable. So previously we had participants come to our office for meetings because that seemed like the most productive way to, really focus on what the adult wanted to pursue and the goals of the adult. But when you're working with whole families, sometimes that doesn't always work. Bringing little ones to an office isn't maybe the best setting. So we offer availability and flexibility to have them still come to the office, to go to their home, or a community setting like a library. We've had meetings take place at McDonald's, kind of making it work. Another change for our participants is parents sometimes have a harder time with the children identifying their own goals. So we've had to explain to parents that while you may have goals for your children, and I want to hear them, what we really want to focus on too is what are the children's goals for themselves, and let's have a conversation about that. So that's been a bit of a difference too. Breaking down goals into very small, actionable steps to ensure success early on and build momentum is really important when working with kids, and a little bit of a shift because a lot of the adults have already been part of a coaching programming and part of a goal-setting program, so they were used to the process. So kind of slowing down and remembering that other members of the family are new to this. And because we have 3 family coaches working in different programs, they're the only ones doing whole family work within their programs. And so what we've heard from staff was that it felt a little bit isolating because they felt like they were operating a little bit on their own. And so because of that, we have started implementing quarterly meetings with the staff who are doing this work to kind of just check on things, see how things are going, what's working well, bounce ideas off from each other, and any input about how to make the embedded 2Gen model easier for everybody and better for everybody. And additionally, with families, so when we first started back in 2014, the tools were entirely informed by those families that were participating. So we continually ask the families the same thing. So what's working for you? How could this work better? And so we really value feedback from staff and from the families because we want to make sure that, what we're doing working for everybody, and if not, like how can we get better?
Yeah. So as you can hear from Sarah, there's been a lot of changes over the last, I can't believe it's almost been 4 years, or it has been 4 years now. And so as we think about what that means for moving forward or what that means for other organizations interested or agencies interested in 2-generational work, we also expanded our intergenerational mobility project, so our 2-generation work, to 2 organizations within our learning network. So EMPath operates a learning network, and 2 organizations were interested in doing that work as well. And so we were partnering with them to figure out, how would this look within their different settings, because we wanted to see where this worked other than just within our own programming. And so in reflecting on that experience too, one of the things that I want to spend some time with all of you today is thinking about, what is my organizational or my agency capacity for doing some of the changes that Sarah just talked through? What is the purpose for wanting to do 2-generational work? What kind of things do I already have? What kind of tools and self-assessments do I already have in my programming? And what does that mean for any changes that need to come? So just spending a little bit more time up front on reflecting regarding, what my capacity is and what would need to change for this to come into place. So what we're going to go with here is why 2-generation? Why now? And the reason that question is up there is I think 2-generation has become such an exciting concept for so many organizations, agencies, and it's truly exciting for me as someone who really believes in whole family work that we're moving our program delivery models to focusing more on a whole family work. We're recognizing that families are so interdependent on each other, and that is what we can expect and how we can best impact changes long-term. And so then, because everyone's talking about 2Gen now, what does that really mean for you? So everyone identifies it differently. So for some folks, 2-generation programs mean that a child is in a child care setting which is attached to a building in which mom or dad or caregiver are also enrolled in some kind of training program. what Sarah and I have been talking about today is this really whole family coaching model, which is different from that other commonly used two-generation program. So in thinking about those two differences, right, so what kind of staff do you need to be hiring to make sure that that new programming can come into place? Do you need to change the hours that staff come to work? Do your staff need to have cars because they need to be traveling to different places to visit them? All of those things come into play when you think about what kind of two-generational work are you interested in doing. So this slide is meant to be a place for you to just do a little bit of a agency self-reflection. So why do you want to have more of a two-generation approach to your work? So what kind of two-generation work are you potentially already doing? Are there tools that could already be used in a way to further that effort, or are there things that you need to be replacing? And why do you think that increasing a two-generation approach would impact your outcomes? My guess is in a positive way. And how is it a value add to what you're trying to do, right? So we're all talking about TANF programs, and obviously those are for the hopes of improving families' life in the way that they have identified for themselves. A lot of us are focused on generational poverty. So are you thinking that a two-generation approach would allow you to break the cycle of poverty? Wouldn't that be a great day? And what do you really need to access for having a two-generation approach? If anybody has any thoughts right now or questions, we welcome those. The next part is going to be Candace talking about the efforts in Washington, D.C., so we're going to switch gears slightly, and we will have time for question and answers at the end, but in case this is a part that's particularly, I don't know, leaving some thoughts and questions or statements for folks.
Do you want people to ask questions now or just move on? We can get on. Okay. So at this time, we're happy to turn the program over to our friends in Washington, D.C., and we will maybe bring up those questions again later on for all of us to discuss. But thank you so much, Stephanie and Sarah.
Thank you. So this is Candace Driscoll, and I work for the DC Department of Human Services. My colleague Agnes Benson and I have been a part of the learning community that ACF is sponsoring, and we have learned a lot throughout this process. And I was just asked to talk a little bit about how we use coaching in our TANF program. We have a program called Targeted Mobility Coaching that is about 2 years old at this point. So I just want to talk a little bit about our program, how we got started, and how we use the two-generational framework to really help serve our families. So the theory of our Targeted Mobility Coaching Program, or TMC, as we refer to it, is really to empower our customers to change their own situation. One of the values of our agency is really believing in the inherent potential of every human being, and so our job is really to help empower customers to make the change that they want to see for themselves and their families, and that is the theory that we use in our TMC program. It's a family-centered approach, and customers self-identify their own needs when they develop a plan and identify goals for their life. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on how the TMC program came about. TMC began as a pilot project in 2016, and it focused on customers who had a history of being unengaged with us here at DHS for a long time. And so since that time, the program has expanded to serve new customers entering the TANF program as opposed to those who had a history of being unengaged. The goal of TMC is really to assist customers with achieving their employment, education, or occupational training goals by utilizing the mentoring/coaching model. At DHS, we have an office known as the Office of Work Opportunity, and this is really the space that we use to pilot a lot of our new programs that we're thinking about and do some national best practices. And so this is how the TMC program started and became a pilot, and it was operated out of OWO. So it was first piloted in OWO, with customers who would do better with a coach rather than going to one of our traditional employment providers. The good thing about our program is that I think what has really helped to be successful is that from the very beginning, we had a lot of support from our leadership here at DHS, including the director, the administrator of the division, and the deputy administrator. So really from the top level of management all the way down, they really champion using the coaching model from the very beginning because they believed in the individualized approach and the personalized support that the model really, that's really the foundation of the model. So they were in agreement about serving customers in a different way in hopes that we would get a different result in some of the positive outcomes that was mentioned previously by my friends at EMPath. So I said before that our target population are customers who are receiving TANF. The program started with those who were hard to engage, but we have since expanded to serving new customers. We did see some positive results from the first kind of year of the pilot, so our director really wanted to shift our energy and see if we had been targeting customers who were being unengaged, what would our results look like if we started with customers who were just entering the TANF program. And so I just also on this slide wanted to give folks a sense of our caseload size, which has since gone up since these numbers, but we are serving about 11,000 families in our TANF program that includes 20,000 children. I also, before going over this slide, which is just a depiction of our service delivery in our TANF program, I wanted to talk about what the model looks like for TMC. So the model uses a principle of individualization and teaming through the principles of individualization, which recognizes a customer's individual strengths and needs, and teaming, which promotes the integration of silos within health and human services. DHS has seen improved engagement with customers who have gone through the TMC program. So for example, few customers in TMC are sanctioned due to non-participation, and more customers are meeting their hourly participation requirements, which is very promising. We have also seen more consistent engagement, such as our customers attending their GED classes consistently for 3 months and keeping a lot of different appointments with other providers, such as their mental health providers. So we are very excited for what we've been able to see so far in the 2 years that the program has been in existence. So with this slide, I thought that it would be helpful to give some context about where TMC fits within our broader service delivery model. And so when a customer enters the TANF program, it starts with an application, and then we do an assessment and orientation, which you can see on your left-hand side of this chart. And so the introduction to the TANF program starts with an upfront comprehensive assessment that determines a customer's employability, and it screens for barriers to employment. The results of the assessment are then used to refer customers to services that are tailored to their needs, their strengths, their preferences, and their circumstances. The TNC team was developed intentionally to target services, resources, education, family development, and career pathways for customers receiving TANF. And so from the application and assessment phase, we use that information to develop an individualized responsibility plan. And so TMC is really categorized in our service delivery as a barrier remediation service because it's there to help customers who, like I said before, may not be ready to go to one of our traditional employment providers, but that they would really do well with the coaching model in order to address some barriers that they may be experiencing. So with the help of their coach, customers develop their IRP. And TMC focuses on not only identifying any barriers that the customer may face, like I said before, such as like a mental health disorder, a substance use disorder, any literacy issues, but they also really talk about the strengths and supports that the customers come with and that they may have access to. And so from the application and assessment phase, they then go into developing their individual responsibility plan. And once in the program, they have access to some of the supports and services listed on this slide. and we really serve our customers through contracts, through partnerships with our sister agencies, and through our Office of Work Opportunity like I mentioned before. And so this slide I wanted to spend a little bit more time on now that you guys have a better sense of how we started TMC and kind of what our service delivery model is. I wanted to spend some time talking about how it fits into the two-generational framework, since that's the topic of discussion today. When we got into the learning community, one of our goals was really to think about how we could incorporate a two-gen approach into TMC. And as an agency ourselves, we are thinking about how we can really bolster our two-generation approach, not only in our TANF program, but agency-wide. And so this chart was developed to really help the coaches within the program see that the work that they have already been doing with a lot of our customers already fits into the two-gen framework. And so what you will see in the middle is the 5 core components of the two-generational approach. And this was actually developed by Ascend. And so the theory is that families need access to these 5 core components really in order to be able to thrive and break the cycle of generational poverty. And so this slide depicts how TMC fits into each of these 5 components. So I'll start by going over one component one by one, and I'll start with early childhood development. So our coaches in TMC really help to connect our parents and TANF to any child care services that they might need. And our goal is always to connect our customers to the highest quality child care that is available. So we have strong partnerships with our sister agency, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, who is in charge of the child care services for the city. And so when a coach works with a parent, they really start by asking questions about their family and their children and find out what's going on there. Similar to EMPath, the sessions do take place in a variety of settings. Our coaches do home visits. Customers can come to the office, or they can also do meetings within a community setting. As it relates to the post-secondary education and employment part of the two-generational approach, TMC uses various assessments to really help customers think about what employment goals they have for themselves and where they want that to lead for their families. So for example, they do an assessment called My Next Move online assessment, and it's a career assessment to help a parent identify where they want to go. We're very intentional about having conversations about career pathways and also linking our customers to other CBOs and sister agencies that also offer employment services that might be beneficial or classes. So we have partnerships with our Office of Employment Services and local colleges in the community. As it relates to building economic assets, our coaches also do a financial assessment with our families. It's called Your Money, Your Goals. And this really is to just help have a conversation about where our families are financially, what their credit score might be, what their savings goal might be for themselves, if they've established a bank account, really so that they can start to think about how they can be even more resourceful than they already are with the assets that they have available to them, and also so that they can begin to pass these good habits down to their children, so that as children see their parents spending money and being responsible, they also will build that same habit as they grow. Under the health and well-being component, our coaches again make linkages to other services that DHS might not offer ourselves, but that we know our customers could use, and it would be very supportive to their journey. So for example, for any customer that may be struggling with a mental health condition, we have partnerships with our Department of Behavioral Health. We have connections to DC Safe for customers who may be experiencing domestic violence. So we just make sure that we are also intentional about looking at the full picture that our families are coming to the table with, and that definitely includes health and well-being. And then finally, under the social capital part of the two-generational approach, we find out a lot through the TANF comprehensive assessments, which I talked about earlier when customers initially come into the TANF program. But once the customer sits down with the coach, they do something called echo mapping, and this really helps a customer for themselves identify what their support network looks like and how this network can be supportive to them as they identify their goals and identify the small steps that it's going to take to get them there. So a lot of the activities that happen in TMC fit very well into the two-generational concept. I think right now as an agency, we're looking at what additional partnerships we might need to strengthen this approach and what other techniques and practices we may need to put into place to make sure that we're continuing along this vein. The learning community has been very helpful in that for us. So I want to end with just a few lessons that we've learned in the time that we've been operating TMC. The first being that TwoGen is important in supporting the needs of the whole family, that we know when parents are worried about their kids in any kind of way or they have different circumstances going on with their family, it's really hard for them and any of us to focus on any goals we have for ourselves. So the two-generational approach really helps in serving the needs of the whole family. We learned that it's important to support staff who are utilizing a coaching model because sometimes customers present with multiple barriers, and we have to make sure that our staff are also taking care of themselves so that they can be effective coaches for our customers. We have learned to be strategic about when we want to expand the program into which target population. So like I said before, we started with one target population, and now we are at the point where we're thinking about what other target population within our customer base it would also be beneficial to. And finally, just that the coaching approach may take more time, like EMPath mentioned before, but often has stronger and more lasting outcomes, which is very important for us here at DHS. So with that, I think that I will hand it back over for the discussion portion of this webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Candace. We learned a lot over here, and I'm sure everybody else on the call found your presentation so informative. So at this point, we're going to invite you to ask your questions or comments. Folks have public strategies. If people want to actually speak, can you instruct them on how to do that?
Sure. Yes, if you're going to ask any questions for the panelists to answer, remember at the bottom right you will see an icon of a hand. Just select that hand and we'll know to call on you, okay? And it'll go in the order of whoever selects it first, okay?
Thank you so much. And you also, if you don't want to say your question out loud to everyone, you can use the question box as well to type in your question, and we will keep an eye out for it. I'm also going to go back to this slide of the questions that we were asking you to think about in your subconscious, and hope that some of you will be willing to share with us your thoughts on these. So, but before that, I actually have one question I want to ask Candace, because you're doing the TwoGen work in the TANF setting. As we've gone around and worked with a lot of states, one of the issues that comes up all the time are the very large caseloads in a TANF program. And so how did you deal with that in DC? What are the caseload sizes for your coaches that are doing the TwoGen work in TCM, and what kinds of changes did you make beyond the caseload even to be able to offer this kind of service?
Sure. So I will start by answering that question with what I know. And I have my colleague Agnes Benson, who's also on the line. She's the supervisor of the TMC program, so I'll let her add anything that I may be missing or misinterpreting. But so because it started as a pilot program, I think we didn't want to have the caseload be too large. And again, we've only been at this for 2 years, so we're constantly thinking of how and when it is appropriate to expand the program. But I think at any one time, there's between there's a caseload of 20 to 30 customers that participate in TMC. And I believe that may be per coach. But Agnes, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure, and that is roughly correct. But the caseloads are broken down in active and inactive customers, and as we enter into this two-gen approach, it is more work because you have the family with the individual that applied for TANF. So one of the things that we're going to do in the immediate future is to have someone deal with the inactive customers, which is an administrative portion, so our coaches will only deal with active customers. So we're going to bring that caseload down, but as it stands right now, it's inactive and active customers. But our plan moving forward is to give the inactive customers to someone that would maintain that and outreach to them till we can get them active.
Thank you. I've had a question come in for both organizations, and that is, like, how often do you meet with the whole family? So, EMPath, do you want to start first?
Yeah, this is Sarah. I can speak to that. So when new families come on board for TwoGen Work, we're meeting with them pretty often. I mentioned before we have a number of self-assessments and tools that we use with each individual that's participating in the TwoGen model. And so in the beginning, we're meeting with families about weekly or every other week, and then as their time with us progresses, that number can go down to about once a month. But initially, as we're getting to know each other and learning about each family member and what their goals are, we're meeting weekly. Yeah.
Thanks.
How about what? This is Agnes from DHS. For us, as where we are now, the customer applied for TANF, so we start with the customer. So upon their request is when we bring the family in. So like next week we're meeting with a family in here in DC, and for us we call it DC Cross Connect, which is teaming, where we bring in the family and or other vendors that's connected to them. So we do it upon the individual person that applied for TANF, their request, and we've seen an increase. So it's happening maybe 3 to 4 families a month. The biggest one, we're going back to school, so we know that's going to increase because we have children with IEPs and behavior issues, and we partner with them to help with that process.
Yeah, and that leads to one of the questions I think that is a follow-up to what Candace talked about, is that sometimes when you, or not sometimes, but really always, when you develop a whole family or a two-gen approach, you find that you need to bring in resources that you didn't have before, because now you're dealing with children, and there are different, they have different needs and different institutions that they work with. So I'm curious to know what kinds of additional resources have you had to develop, and did you have any challenges with that? So why don't we start with DC, Agnes and Candace?
So additional resources for the families, we do cash and non-cash incentives. So when we meet with families, one particular family, if the child continues on his behavior plan, then we started giving them stickers. So supplies like that. We're looking at in October, something that we're rolling out is increasing the cash incentive for various things that they do. So the additional resources of non-cash incentives are definitely more time for the staff and more training for the staff. So basically those things like that.
And I would just add to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Candace.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I think one thing that we have done in the process of even continuing now is looking at the current partnerships, for example, that we have with sister agencies and looking at if those are still a good fit in the way that they are designed now and how we need to potentially expand those partnerships and what that will look like. So, for example, we have a partnership with the agency that's in charge of the early childhood development and all of the early learning for the district, and we are in conversations with them about how we can really bolster that partnership so that we know that all of our families who are receiving TANF and all of the children are really in the highest quality child care that's available in the city. And we know that child care is a really big support for a lot of our families in order to help them achieve their goals. So I think that's one thing that was important for us that could be important for other TANF offices around the country.
Thanks. Agnes, you had mentioned needing additional training. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the training that you've arranged for your staff?
So one training that we did most recently was customer service. So trying to infuse the coaching model even in our customer service. And also, when the customers come in, we talk to them about, of course, motivational interviewing, especially if we don't have the individual customer and we may have someone in their family member. For example, we have one family, this family is homeschooling, the 16, 17-year-olds preparing for college. So we teach the coaches not only when you speak to the customer, but you got to be ready to speak to that child too because they're there as well. So come to the table prepared with resources of what you talked about you're going to have. So motivational interviewing, customer engagement, we're really family engagement, and good customer service.
Great. EMPath, do you have some?
Yeah. So at EMPath, we really were shifting with this new model. This is Stephanie, sorry. With our new model, we were shifting to doing service delivery that included children, which is definitely new for us. So most of the staff here at EMPath work with adults and are used to working with adults. So, you know, looking at credit reports and doing financial coaching, which looks different than like getting a little kiddo ready to go to school, looking at their IEP. So when we first started it, we needed to make sure we had someone who had some child development background as well as had experience working in the public schools in the area, had connections to understand what the IEP process looked like, what kind of resources are available for children in public schools or non-public schools, how do you, what are the rights that children have if they're homeless versus if they're not homeless. So thinking through all of those pieces that weren't as much of our service delivery, we had them a little bit, but we were really referring out to calling schools to ask rather than having someone in-house. So I would say we were like continually looking to expand the pool of, I would call, child and family specialists in-house to be asking more of those specific needs. In addition, we were creating a lot more tip sheets for staff to be aware of. So what is the process for applying for child care? What is the process for, you know, or what resources exist for certain behavior issues? And, you know, what are some strategies that you can be using with children in the home? And the home piece is interesting because a lot of our programs do not do home visiting. So not only were we bringing in a whole family component, but we were also changing the environment in which the coach is working with families. And home visiting is its own, I call it like its own special beast, right? It's just, it's a wonderful place to be to really get to know the family, but it also takes a different kind of training to feel comfortable to do that. So making sure we're talking about safety protocols, and also how do you make sure you engage the family when you have a 3-year-old running circles around everybody, right? Or you're in the office and the same thing is happening. So talking about engagement strategies for keeping everyone engaged, and I think that's primary. Anything else you would add, Sarah?
We did, that has been super helpful having somebody in-house that's easily accessible for quick questions about child-related things. We also had a connection with an IEP advocate who will take on individualized education plans. So kids with special needs in schools who have an individualized education plan. So sometimes the parents don't fully understand the process, don't understand the rights that they and their kids have within the public school system, or are not happy with these services that the kiddos are getting. And so that sometimes goes beyond, you know, my capacity, for example. And so we're able to connect with a specialist advocate who does this in her line of work to go with the parent and talk through these issues with the parent and the families in a way that we wouldn't have been able to provide before. So that connection has been really helpful. We also have connections to an after-school program that's located in one of our offices, a Head Start that's located in one of our offices for those kids that are in that age range. So building out those local resources has been really helpful because we can't do it all either. So.
And I would say to add to the training piece that Agnes brought up, we have had to do an increased amount of training for our staff. So one, this is a new model, so we need to do more training to be able to use the new tools, but also training components about, you know, what are different strategies that exist for behavior intervention with children. You know, what are ways that we can talk about goal setting with kids? How do we adapt that language that we used to use with adults to make it more kid-friendly? And I think that we've been spending a lot of time, how do we translate some of the protocols or the, you know, conversation guides we have with our tools that adapt to kids' needs, and we continue to adapt them.
So we have two more questions that came in. I'm going to throw them out right now and ask each of you to answer them both if you can, although the first question I think is directed mostly toward Agnes and Candace in DC. That question is, how was your staff training for customer service completed? So if you could tell us very quickly about that. And then the last question is, how have the families reacted to your two-generation work? So we just have about 1 minute. If you could quickly answer that, then we will send everyone on their way.
Hello, this is Agnes. So our customer engagement training is a part of a curriculum where we just rolled out this year, so it'll be required once a year. So we set up a curriculum at the beginning of the year, and they know what date they have to attend, and we send out the SurveyMonkey for them to sign up. The families, what we finding with the families, they really like the two-gen approach because, and the way I tell the staff, if you have children especially or a loved one, if you deal with my loved one and help my loved one and love my loved one, then you have my attention. So when we help the family, we get their attention and they're more apt to engage.
Oh, that was beautiful. I just want to say, if you're part of the ICE project and you are interested in talking to DC about their customer service training, they might be willing to have a phone call with you and share more information. So let your coach from your state know, and they can connect you with Agnes to talk more about that. And to conclude, EMPath, how have your participants felt about the two-gen work?
They love it. I think that having intentional full family time it can be rare in our busy world, and so even just carving out time for families to get together and talk to each other about what's important to them and their dreams and where there's like what strengths they bring as a family has been really lovely and wonderful. So
I have a little anecdote from a family that brings that to life a little bit. So two actually, one that says, I love that it allowed my family members to grow individually without us as a family growing apart. And the other one was that, you know, we never used to talk about how we were feeling at home. And one mom has severe depression, and her son was saying, you know, she never told me how she was feeling, and now even if she's having a bad day, I know. And now we've noticed we don't yell at each other anymore, and we laugh because we don't know what else to do because we're not yelling at each other. And so it's this slow change in the family dynamic that allows them to check in with each other and has made a lot of difference for our families.
So thank you very much to the presenters, and thank you to all of you on the call for being patient with our technical difficulties. We're glad to do this call, and we will talk to you again soon. So have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all again to the panelists for presenting today. And once again, if you have any additional questions, please do so now.
We're actually done now.
Okay, well, thank you. This concludes our webinar.